Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, and we're going to be providing an update to the bull market support band. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Before we jump in, I wanted to mention that, again, Bitcoin Miami is this week, and I've locked down a time. So from 12:30 to 2:30 on the last day, so on the 20th. 12:30 to 2:30, I will be near there's these Bitcoin inflatables, so I'll be near there. There'll be a banner if you want to meet. Anyways, let's go ahead and talk here about Bitcoin. This probably will be the last video for the week that I'll post because I'll just be out of town and I likely won't be posting videos while I'm in Miami. I can't promise that I won't have at least one more, but I wouldn't be expecting any here for the next few days or so. So just coming in right now, the bull market support band for Bitcoin is at 25.2 to 25.5. So again, because I won't be here for a few days, we'll talk about a few different scenarios here because a lot can happen, right? A lot can happen in a week. But anyways, the bull market support band for Bitcoin essentially sits around $25,000. Okay, around 25K, 25 to 25.5. And so it's not even that much lower than where we currently sit. I mean, all we would have to do is Bitcoin would need to go down another 5% or so, and then we would essentially find ourselves at $25,000. And of course, the question is will it hold as support or not? History shows that the pre-halving years do not tend to hold as support, not for the duration of the entire year. If we were to take a look at 2015, you can see that we failed to hold it as support there. And then in 2019, we failed to hold it as support there. However, you might also note that it took until September in 2019 to fall below it, right? So it took until September. It did not occur early in the year. It took until September. And over here in 2015, it took until August. However, also, it's important to note that in 2015, we didn't break above it until June. Right, so I mean, there of course is some consideration there. Yes, we broke below it in August, but we didn't actually break above it until June. Whereas in 2019, we broke above it in April, and then we fell back below it in September. If you were to actually take a look at how long we stayed above the bull market support band last time until we broke back below it, you can see it took around 25 weeks. So far, we've been above the 20-week SMA, the bull market support band in general, for about 18 weeks. Also note that in 2019, when we did get above the 20-week SMA, we rallied until week number 12. So far this time, we've rallied until week 13. Of course, it could go, the rally could extend beyond week 13 if there's going to be another push up in, say, late May or June. But in terms of time spent above the 20-week until hitting that high, you can see that the time component has more or less run its course. Although you could look at this in a few different ways as well. I mean, you could look at the fact that this rally over here had sort of three distinct moves, right? A move and then consolidation, and then a move and consolidation, and then one final move before the descent begins. So far, we've had really, one clear move here, and then consolidation, and then another move, and then consolidation again. And so, will it repeat 2019 in that sense? Of course, it's impossible to know. We all, of course, have our opinions. My argument is that if you're in crypto, whatever you have in crypto, in my opinion, not financial advice, right? But Bitcoin is where you want to be, as the dominance should go up, whether Bitcoin USD goes up or down. Do note that in 2019, we essentially had, this was basically like a 70-something% rally or so, 80% rally, and then we had another 80% rally, and then the last one was an 80% rally as well. So three really strong rallies. This one has obviously been tempered, right? We have not been getting, these have not been 80% rallies, right? They've been closer to 60% rallies. So this certainly has been a tempered version of what we saw in 2019. And if we were to go take a look a little bit closer, and we actually talked about this in the video yesterday, right? But if you look at the year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin in 2019 and 2023, you can see that clearly this has been a very tempered version of it, and we've now fallen actually below where we previously were. In fact, it was the second move higher by Bitcoin that got us up to this level over here back in 2019, whereas we haven't even gotten to that point based on this level. Now, it looks a little bit more closer. This is 2015 and 2019. If you add that average of 2015 and 2019, you'll actually see it's tracking that a little bit closer than any of the other individual years. But I mean, be that as it may, there's no guarantee that it tracks for the entire time. Again, my general speculation is that Bitcoin spends the duration of this year between, within the bounds of 12K to 35K is my best guess. Of course, I could easily be wrong on that, but if you wanted me to guess, that is what I would generally suggest. Again, one other thing to look at, and again, there's so many different ways we can compare to 2019 and 2015 that of course, it's always good to do justice to both sides. Of course, the bulls will find reasons to find, compelling to say it should move higher, and the bears will find reasons to say that it should move lower. The bulls could point to the fact that there was, again, 3 clear distinct rallies over here, and this time we've only had 2. The bears might point out that once total 3, the altcoin market fell below its 20-week moving average, that was a sign that the Bitcoin rally was over, right? Like, so if you look at total 3 in 2019, you can see that it actually fell below its 20-week SMA in July, and it had weekly closes below it, and we just had a weekly close last week below it. So that was sort of a sign that the best part of the rally was behind us back in 2019, once total 3 was below it. And you can see again that and let me switch this over to so this is the Bitcoin dominance. Let me switch this over to Bitcoin USD. And we're gonna move this over to 2019. So you can see here Bitcoin peaked in June of 2019, and total 3 peaked in June, and then total 3 sort of fell below the bull market support band in July. The interesting thing, though, is again, Bitcoin, while it didn't put in a new high, it still pushed back up in July and August, but they all just ended up being lower highs. So it took Bitcoin until September to break below its bull market support band, whereas total 3 broke below its bull market support band in July. So if you think about it from that sense, then one might argue that total 3 broke below its bull market support band about 2 months before Bitcoin broke below its own bull market support band back in 2019. And again, total 3 just broke below it last week. So if that's any indication that then Bitcoin could still have some time to spin above the 20-week SMA, once Bitcoin peaked in 2019, it actually took 13 weeks to break back down below its bull market support band, right? 13 weeks. So far, we're only in about week number 5. So that is that's something that I think is worthwhile pointing out. And again, there's a lot of similarities to 2019. There's also some differences, right? There are some, there's this idea of some of these returns have been tempered when compared to the prior cycle. This seems somewhat obvious, right? We would expect diminishing returns going back to one of the theories from the last cycle. We would expect diminishing returns from one cycle to another. And even in the pre-halving years, I think it's worthwhile to consider that you'll likely see some form of diminishing returns. I mean, Bitcoin could still push higher and still have a form of diminishing returns compared to what it saw in 2019. Because in 2019, Bitcoin essentially went up 341% from its 2018 low. From the 2022 low, Bitcoin has gone up about 100% or so. So still not really that close to what was accomplished in 2019. Do note, though, and I will reiterate, that if Bitcoin is to push higher this year, I would imagine it would occur during the first half of the year, as the second half of the year, just like we saw in 2019, is likely going to be more so a narrative related to recession probabilities actually going up, rather than just looking at leading indicators talking about it coming in the nebulous future. I think in the second half of the year, it'll actually start to materialize within the data. And so the second half of the year, I think will again mostly be down for Bitcoin. I mean, it could be a slow bleed like we saw back over here, and then I think you get into sort of the real move in 2024, 2025 timeframe. But again, that's still a little ways off. The other thing that I wanted to point out, so if you look at the monthly candles, if you take a look at monthly, so these are our monthly candles for just Bitcoin USD. I mean, of course, right now this is a red candle, but again, we're only about halfway through the month, right? So a lot could change between now and the end of the month. If you look at Heikin-Ashi candles, what I would be looking for, especially as we get into the second 2 weeks of May, is that once Bitcoin was really unable to continue to see higher candle bodies here, that sort of marked the end of the local uptrend in the pre-halving year. So that's what I would be looking towards if Bitcoin cannot break above that level right there that we hit in April of 2023. That would sort of be a potential sign that we're starting this phase of the pre-halving year, right? Sort of the down phase of the pre-halving year. And again, it's not, it's nothing to say that Bitcoin won't be resilient in the macro scale, and it's not to say that Bitcoin won't be strong during the next phase of economic expansion. It's just to say, I mean, we typically see that in pre-halving years, right? You do get some green, but it's typically also followed up with more red, and that's what we saw in the last 2 pre-halving years, and I think you're likely going to see the same thing play out once again. I could be wrong, but that would be my general expectation. And so I'm looking to see here if it does sort of just stall out here like it did in 2019. Can Bitcoin USD push above this level, or does it sort of fall short? And if it does fall short, then the next month could start to see that more localized downtrend. The other way to look at this is to look at the bull market support band back on the weekly time scale, and to consider the number of months after the break above its 20-week SMA, right? So, and this is looking at let me look at non-Heikin-Ashi candles here. So I don't want to look at Heikin-Ashi candles. So here you can see that it was the move up here, right? So you had the 1 monthly candle get above the 20-week, and then you had 2 more, and it was the third one after the move above the 20-week, right? So 1, 2, and then 3. So far, this one actually went longer, right? This was 1, 2, 3, and 4 as measured from the 20-week SMA. The other thing to consider is that the rally in the pre-halving year, at least what we saw last time, lasted about 6 months, and it actually started in the year before the pre-halving year, and it lasted about 6 months, right? From December until June. Okay, so about 6 months or so. This time it started in November. And so 6 months would be May. Of course, the local high so far was in April. I don't know if we're going to go put in a new local high or not, but we are getting pretty close to the amount of time that it took Bitcoin in the pre-halving year back in 2019 before it slowly started to roll back over. So again, I think, if you're a bear, I think you can find reasons to think that it would sort of just fade here. If you're a bull, you can find reasons as well. I mean, one of the reasons, I suppose, would just be the general sentiment in the space. One of the things that we've talked about before is how markets can rally the wall of worry, up the wall of worry, right, until there's a compelling reason enough not to do so. And again, I think the most compelling reason will be the material rise in the unemployment rate, which has not happened yet. Though we did get a hot read on initial claims last week, so you can kind of see the labor market is starting to loosen up a little bit. So I guess it just depends on how, where does the next unemployment rate come in? Where does initial claims continue to come in? Does it continue to push higher and show sustained weakness in the labor market, or does it not and show resilience in the labor market? Do note, by the way, that when Bitcoin held the local low last time that Bitcoin held was around 20K, and it occurred essentially at the 20-week SMA. Now we're at 25K for the bull market support band, right? Now the bull market support band is at 25K, so it's only about 5% lower than where we are. So I would argue that if the bulls are going to hold the line, then that would be the area to hold it, right? The other things to look at here, there's a few other ways that you can look at this, and I'm just rambling on because I realize I'm not going to be putting out a video probably for a few days. One thing to note here in 2019 was that once the 20-week SMA crossed over the 21-week EMA, it was a sign that the local high was in, right? Once you saw the 20-week SMA cross above the 21-week EMA. Hasn't happened yet this time around, but it's getting pretty close. And if it were to occur, then again, that could be a sign to look for as well. There's, of course, other ways to look at this besides the 20-week SMA. We could go to the daily time frame and look at the 100-day moving average. You could argue that we held the 20-week SMA here, although you could also argue that we held the 100-day moving average, not the 20-week SMA, right? I mean, we held technically both back in March of 2020. But if you look at the 100-day, you can see that that's where we are right now. Bitcoin is sort of sitting right here, held the 100-day SMA over here. That's where it currently is trying to hold as well. And of course, that brings up the idea of, well, what happened in 2019 when it got to the 100-day moving average? Well, Bitcoin only hit it once. Once it hit it in 2019, it was sort of a sign that the highs were in. Okay. Now this time was obviously different, right? Because we hit the 100-day and then we put in a new high. So it has not played out in the exact same way, but you can see that last time in 2019, we had sort of a wick down to the 100-day moving average. We sort of popped back up for a few days, continued back down, daily closes below it, one last move to the upside, and then it just continued to slowly bleed for basically the next 7 to 8 months. And so if the 100-day moving average, right, if it's just following its 2019 self and it's not just this again, then you would be looking to see, does it actually take out these prior highs, or does it just continue to be one lower high after another? Because in 2019, we just continued to get lower highs, right? But just one lower high after another. We hit the 100-day, we rallied for a few days, got back below it, rallied back up to the trend line, and then sort of just slowly sold off into September. So now we're sort of looking at something similar, right? We're so far, we're just putting in these lower highs. We just hit the 100-day. And again, the question is it going to play out like 2019? If it plays out like 2019, then you would expect it to sort of rally. What it's basically done, sort of roll over, go below the 100-day, then maybe rally back up to this trend line, and then sort of slowly come back down and then sell off. If it's going to do what it did just a couple months ago, then it would mean just an explosive rally. I remember this rally here was sort of brought on by the Fed bailing out the banks. Of course, some people say it was not a bailout, but you can call it whatever you want. If they hadn't done it, things would have gotten a lot worse, right? We probably would have had a bank run and we would have had a lot more issues. So to some degree, the Fed doing what they did over here, we saw a lot of risk assets sort of explode up to the upside. So again, it's at the 100-day here. It's at the 100-day here. Another thing to look at is actually another weekly moving average, but on an even smaller time frame. That would be the 10-week moving average. So the 10-week moving average might be somewhat interesting. You can see that once we fell below it here in 2019, we actually saw a push higher the following week. It still ended up being a lower high though, right? But we still got a push back up higher over the next couple of weeks or so once we saw a weekly close below the 10-week moving average. We actually just got a weekly close below the 10-week moving average, okay, which is the first one we've gotten this year. Really, well, I guess the first week we rallied up to it, but in terms of moving to the downside and falling below it, this is the first weekly close below it really since this sustained uptrend began. And so then the question is it a fake out, right? Is it a fake out like this was a fake out, or like this was a fake out, right? Because we do get those sometimes where you get above it and then it just sort of resumes the trend, right? So I suppose the question you really have to ask yourself is it a fake out or not? If it's a fake out, then Bitcoin needs to get back above the 10-week moving average very quickly, okay? And the 10-week SMA is at around 28,232, okay? So if Bitcoin cannot get above 28.2 within the next couple of weeks, then it's probably not a fake out. If we get back above 28.2 and hold it, and again, the 10-week SMA is moving higher pretty quickly. If we get above it and then hold it as support, and in a week or two it'll be at 29K, then that would be more so that this is a sign of a fake out. But if it just does what it did in 2019, which is where it gets back above it, right, but only just to be put in another lower high, then again, you're still looking at following what it did in 2019. Because again, in 2019, once we got a weekly close below the 10-week SMA, that was sort of all she wrote for the next 7, 8, 9 months or so, okay? And then in 2015, it was obviously a lot different. You can see that we had, closes below the 10-week, more or less just continued to resolve to the downside. There wasn't really any fake outs here. It was just once you got that weekly close below it, we continued to just push lower for several more weeks to come, and it happened a couple of times, and then the sustained breakout above the 10-week moving average didn't really happen until Q4 of the pre-halving year. And last cycle, it didn't really happen until April of the halving year. And potentially it could have occurred as soon as January of the halving year, but we did get the sort of this the pandemic drop. So that's, of course, something that we should take into consideration. I think the thing that really draws my attention is sort of looking at total 3. You guys know I've been very against the altcoin market for a long time, and I still think that Bitcoin is by far the better play. And I'm not at the point where I'm going, I'm not at the point to change my mind on that. I think that the dominance of Bitcoin needs to go higher. You're seeing very similar types of movements go on in the tech sector. A lot of people are going to the relative safety of the higher market cap tech stocks, just like I think people in the altcoin market are going to the relative safety of Bitcoin. It doesn't mean that the entire market can't go down, but it just means that the lower risk plays are sort of sucking in this liquidity. But with total 3, I think the issue here is that you are, and I don't really fully know. I don't know if it's the best comparison, but like to some degree, it looks like a very tempered version of 2019, right? Like you had a low, you then rallied on up, and then you retested it, and then you rallied up again to put in the high, and then we fell below it, right? So I kind of see a very similar pattern, right? You put in a low, we rallied above it, and then we retested it, and then we rallied up again to put in a new high, and then we just put in a weekly close below the 20-week SMA, right? So to some degree, this looks like a very tempered version of what happened in 2019. Now, the counterpoint, of course, is that, well, in 2019, total 3 rallied until June. And right now, it's only May. So, should we not wait one more month before we draw conclusions? Yeah, probably. We probably should. Be that as it may, again, back then, once we had weekly closes below it, it was not a good sign. Bitcoin continued to push a little, back up to the upside, but it was only a lower high. It wasn't a higher high once we saw total 3 back below its 20-week SMA. So I still do remain very bearish on alt Bitcoin pairs because I think Bitcoin's going to just crush them regardless of the direction of Bitcoin USD. And if Bitcoin goes back up, whether it's a higher high or not, whether Bitcoin goes and puts in a higher high, like if it goes to 33 or 35K, whether it accomplishes that or not, if it just goes to 31K or 29K, I think you'll just see the dominance of Bitcoin go higher and probably break above that 49% level. And again, even when Bitcoin broke back up higher in July, the altcoin market continued to really stay below its 20-week SMA, right, and was not able to get back above it, and it showed the relative weakness of the altcoin market. And so the argument here is that, like, there is definitely cyclical behavior in crypto, right? Like, you see these bear market years, right, and this is the altcoin market, and then you see sort of the pre-halving year for Bitcoin, total 3 finds some renewed strength, but at least so far, that renewed strength in the altcoin market hasn't been nearly as impressive as we saw back over here in 2019. Not nearly as impressive. And I suppose you could argue that if Bitcoin goes higher, it could drag the altcoin market back up with it, and that's potentially a potential outcome. That's a potential outcome, of course, but I still can't get over this idea that, like, the altcoin market was unable to really take out its November 2022 high, even though Bitcoin did, right? Again, this includes stable coins. So if you look at a lot of the individual altcoins, you can find ones that did, of course. But this is something that to me, it looks like really relative weakness in the altcoin market, just like we're seeing in low cap tech stocks and just lower market cap equities in general. They're not performing as well as the higher market cap equities. And again, this is something that when I look at the altcoin market, I just see again sustained weakness. And so I say, like, if Bitcoin holds the line at the bull market support band, like if it holds the line at 25K, then the altcoin market might just bounce back up to the 20-week SMA and get rejected, right? And then even if it's just even if Bitcoin goes back up to the prior high or a lower high, you still might not see the altcoin market get back above its bull market support band, right? Like there's a chance that that's the outcome. And so, this is something I continue to watch because I would like some exposure at some point, not yet, right, in the altcoin market, but I think that, again, with the dominance as low as it is at only 47.95%, I think that the altcoin market remains extremely risky with respect to Bitcoin. And so, again, the argument has been, and has been, this is what my argument is, it has been for a long time, is that, a crypto portfolio, during the latter half of a bear market year, right, in the pre-halving year, and even the early phase of a halving year, is often best suited just being predominantly Bitcoin. And the altcoin market is best suited sort of just waiting on it and waiting until they've bled sufficiently on their Bitcoin pairs. And you might say, well, haven't they bled sufficiently on their Bitcoin pairs? Well, look, a lot of them actually are just putting in new lows as we speak. Like a lot of and I'm not going to cherry pick anyone. I don't want to make anyone upset in this video. But again, if you look at a lot of the altcoins on their Bitcoin pairs, a lot of them just continue to push to new lows. Even though their USD valuations are up off their December lows, their Bitcoin valuations have pushed lower since then. And again, the argument is that when Bitcoin falls, if and when it falls below the 20-week SMA, which I think will happen sometime this year, that's when altcoins get crushed even more, right? Again, Bitcoin will crush them at this phase of the cycle, whether Bitcoin goes up or down. So exposure to Bitcoin gives you really, in my non-financial advice opinion, right, exposure to Bitcoin gives you sufficient exposure to the entire asset class during the pre-halving year because the dominance should go up either way. The altcoins should bleed against Bitcoin either way, right? So to some degree, it makes this argument of, well, whether does it hold the line or not, right? If it does, alts get wrecked because if Bitcoin holds the line here and bounces back up, whether it's a higher high or a lower high, alts get wrecked. And if Bitcoin falls below the 20-week SMA, alts get wrecked as well because history shows us that when Bitcoin falls below it, like it did over here in November, the altcoin market significantly underperforms. Okay, and it's just because, and now there's a lot less liquidity in the altcoin market than there was 6 months ago. And so I would be a little bit more concerned that they could move down quicker when the turn comes. Again, I don't know when it's going to come. It could be next week, it could be 6 months from now or 3 months from now. I don't know. These markets certainly have a way of humbling everyone. But again, we are coming up close on the bull market support band. I imagine the bulls would like to see this hold, right? And this is where the battle will take place. If you put weight into it, if you put more weight into the 100-day, I suppose you could already say that we've already held it. But in 2019, once we tagged it, we got a brief move higher, and then it sort of just faded back below it again. It should be an interesting second half of the year, that's for sure. We're about halfway through the second quarter right now. So my argument is and then we'll wrap it up, right? My argument is that if Bitcoin is going to push higher this year, I think it needs to happen in this quarter, okay? And if it doesn't, then I don't think it's going to. Is my personal opinion at this phase. And if we fail to hold the 20-week SMA, right? So if we fail to hold it, then again, I think you can easily make the case that the summer lull has already begun, right? We put out a video a few weeks ago talking about how there's this possibility, right, that the summer lull started in April, just like it started in April of 2021, right? And May, this sort of the secondary move in May only ended up just being a lower high, right? So that's sort of the question: is this just a lower high? And if it is, then that means the summer lull has already begun. My guess is that we will have a summer lull. It just is has it started now, or does it start in June, right? In 2019, it started in June. 2021, it started in April. In 2020, We didn't get one, right? In 2020, it was the halving year. The Fed printed $6 trillion, and the summer was actually pretty good, right, for crypto in general. So again, 2019, summer lull started in June. 2020, we didn't get one. 2021, summer lull started in April. 2022, we went into the summer, right? We capitulated in June, and then we sort of just rallied a little bit up until August, and then continued to slowly push down. So yeah, I mean, I think we sort of outlined these scenarios here, and I know this might be frustrating. You probably just want me to say like, hey, this is what's going to happen. But again, as history shows, I'm certainly not capable of knowing exactly what's going to happen, and so I think we have to be prepared for all sorts of outcomes. The reason I like my strategy in the pre-halving years is because I feel comfortable with a crypto portfolio that's predominantly Bitcoin. And it's only until I see the dominance really break above those prior thresholds, right? When it gets to that above 50% and beyond, that's when I think the altcoin market starts to make a little bit more sense from a risk-adjusted returns perspective. But at this phase, I still think it's hard to make that case when you're looking at total 3 below its bull market support band. By the way, total 2 is below it as well. It has not had a weekly close below it. It is below it right now, but last week it actually closed above. It's below it now. It opened below it because the 20-week SMA continued to go higher, but you are seeing the 20-week SMA cross above the 21-week EMA for total 2. And then total, we're not at it yet. I mean, it really does show you, right, the relative strength, right? Total, which includes Bitcoin, is still above the 20-week. Total 2, which excludes Bitcoin, is below it, but it didn't have a weekly close below it yet, even though it's below it right now. And Total 3, which excludes Bitcoin and Ethereum, had a weekly close below it, right? So it really shows you the relative weakness of the altcoin market. And it shows you how the blue chips, Bitcoin and Ethereum, are outperforming, just like Apple and Amazon and Google and these mega cap tech stocks are outperforming a lot of the lower cap tech stocks. So we're sort of seeing this similar action across the board. And I guess the issue is if the large caps come down before the small caps have caught up, that's where small caps just get absolutely crushed. And that's why they are much more risk than the larger cap plays. In a bull market, in say like 2021, the low cap projects are preferred by a lot of people because they go up a lot. But during bear market years or choppy years, they can often just get crushed because there's much more risk with them. There's a lot less liquidity with them as well. So again, I think this will probably be the last video for a little while. Maybe I'll try to get one more out. But with that said, look towards the 20-week SMA for Bitcoin. I think that's going to be an important battle around that $25,000 level. Keep an eye out for that over the next few weeks, and we will see what ultimately happens. Again, I will be meeting people at Bitcoin Miami. We've sort of got a little area next to the Bitcoin inflatables on the 20th, so looking forward to meeting people then. Thank you guys for tuning in. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.